Welcome in, everyone, to another edition of the Next Game, New Game podcast as we recap the 2018 NFL Draft. Matt Catrillo, Alex Kozora back with me this week. Noe and or Tyler, hopefully we'll have them back in our future podcast coming up here. So, Alex, that was a crazy draft, wasn't it?
It was. Maybe a little less than I thought because I didn't see as much action in the first round as I expected in terms of the trades. I predicted a really trade-heavy draft process, but still, a lot of surprises, a lot of fun as always.
And we'll certainly break it all down. We got a lot to talk about with where the quarterbacks ended up, a lot to talk about with our PA teams and the Eagles and Steelers, and we'll start with that first. We'll start with the Eagles, Alex, who didn't have a whole lot of real estate to work with. We knew that going in. They only had 6 picks going in. They ended up trading one of those picks, and now they get a 5 picks to come into this year's class. Not a whole lot of buzz with this class when you look at some of the names and some of the projections, but it's a lot of building for the future and the approach where the Eagles went. And I think, Alex, when you look at this as a whole for the Eagles draft class this year, I kind of like the approach the Eagles took with it. I think they handled it probably as well as they could have. I know this draft class is getting a mixed review among the Philadelphia media and fan base, but I think they needed to hit. They traded back from number 32 with the Ravens, of course. The Ravens get Lamar Jackson in the process. Eagles trade back to the second round. Then they trade back up in the second round. They gave up that 5th round pick, or excuse me, one of the 4th round picks, and they jump in front of Dallas and fittingly pick Dallas Goedert, the tight end out of South Dakota State, who Alex, you and I talked about coming into the draft as that would be a pretty good fit for the Eagles, and that's exactly who they get. And they take him right in front of the Cowboys, who unexpectedly get the news about Jason Witten retiring, and now he will be in the Monday Night Football booth at ESPN. They made that official today. So your thoughts on the Eagles' move there, Alex, and getting Dallas Goedert?
Yeah, no, I get the criticism of the draft, but the expectations had to be relatively low because you had limited draft capital to work with. So like you said, I think trading back, which was the most obvious anticipated move of the first round. Was still a necessary one and a good one for the Eagles. Goedert, yes, is a small school guy, but produced at a really high level. He only got to work out for the first half hour of the first Senior Bowl practice, but just watching him in one-on-ones, the brief time that I got to see him, I thought he looked impressive. He was able to work out at his pro day. He didn't run the 40, which kind of irked some guys, which I can understand, but overall, I think you have a guy that can be that seam threat to help replace a guy like Trey Burton that you lost to Chicago in the offseason. So that was a good pick. I like the middle portions of the draft. Vontae Maddox is your typical nickel corner, but your nickel corner is your starter essentially because of all the sub package and the nickel and dime the teams are going to run. I mean, most teams are in sub definitely more than half the time for some teams. And like Pittsburgh, for example, they were in sub about 70% of the time. So that nickel guy is essentially your starter. Josh Sweat was great value. I guess the medical dropped him. And then I like some of the undrafted guys, which we'll get to a little bit later. So no, I think that Goedert in the second was a great pick to jump over Dallas to get him, which was clear. And I thought the mid-rounds were solid as well.
Because to me, Alex, the key for the Eagles was because of the limited amount of picks they had, they really needed to really hit a home run on at least 1 or 2 of them. And I think they can, and maybe even potentially 3 if you go to a guy like Josh Sweat. As you mentioned, great value except for the medical that they got in the 4th round. And they definitely hit it on the head with a guy like Dallas Goedert. What stands out to me, Alex, is you already have a 6'4", 6'5" guy in Zach Ertz who's already tough to deal with. Now you put another 6'5", 256 guy, a guy that's really long at 34, almost 35-inch arms, and he's got tremendous hands, 10.25-inch hands, guy that can catch the ball with one hand. We saw that displayed during his time in South Dakota. Tell me how you stop that. So I think the Eagles did exactly what they needed to do. And again, you can do, as you mentioned, Alex, the similar things that Doug Peterson was able to do with a guy like Trey Burton when he was with the Eagles, and now, of course, you mentioned he's with the Bears. So I thought Eagles really needed to hit a home run with that 2nd-round pick, being that they traded up, and they did so, and I think he's going to be a great addition. You mentioned Vontae Maddox. This is going to be interesting. Guy that's small for my liking, but I think has the speed at the 4.39 40 time that he ran at the Combine. The Eagles mainly talked about his highly competitive nature, so I think that'll be something to reckon with. We'll see if he can put it together technically on the field. Has some special teams value too, so we'll see where that goes. He put up some pretty good numbers, 7 sacks in the last 3 years to go with 8 interceptions. That made him only one of 3 DBs in Division I to have 7 interceptions and 7 sacks since 2015. That was per Ruben Frank of NBC Sports Philly. So I like some of the kind of production he brings in. He'll compete for the starting nickel spot. Then with Josh Sweat, you see the intrigue. A big dude again. He is long as well. He's almost 35-inch arms too. I think he's quick and fast off the ball. Has a really good first step, but other than that, I think he has a lot of technique to work on as far as a swim move, which I think he showed some signs of, but it's not quite there yet. And I think some coaching, I think he can maybe be a good player to add into the dish. And then the other two, Matt Pryor from TCU, 205 overall in the 6th round. That's going to be a project. And obviously, Jordan Mailata from Australia, the rugby player. A lot of people did not like this pick. People called it a waste. But here's the thing that stands out to me. I get it. It's rugby. It's a different sport. He's playing a lot of guys that he's twice their size, so it's easy for him to look as good as he did in some of those tapes that NFL Network and ESPN were showing. But Alex, let me get your quick thoughts here, and then we'll move on to the Steelers. Is you look at his size, 6'7", 3/4 inches, and 346 pounds, but he ran a 5.12 40 time. That's freakish for a guy his size. So I guess my only beef with this pick would be then is the Eagles are trying to convert him to offensive tackle, which to me, a guy that size and who's used to playing that kind of aggression in rugby, I don't know how much that's going to be to me a tougher transition. Whereas if you put him on maybe the defensive line, or I even see a tight end out of him because he knows how to catch the football. He obviously has that hand-eye coordination from playing in rugby. So, do you agree with the Eagles A, picking him, but B, maybe trying to put him in offensive tackle?
To the first point, they not only did they pick him, they traded up for him.
Right, exactly, too.
They did have a pre-draft visit with him, so they learned about him. It just comes down to work ethic with a guy like that, and it sounds like he is committed to the game because it is going to be a steep learning curve wherever you play him. I mean, I'm fine with him an offensive tackle. I think it's the most logical thing. I don't think defense can work. He's just too tall. You can't be 6'9". You're going to get out leveraged like that. Tight end could be a possibility, but still at that size, I think tackle makes a lot more sense. I think naturally it's going to be the easiest thing where he can use his physical tools, his size and his length to help make up for some of the lack of technique and some of the coaching that's going to take some time to work on. So would I traded up for him? Personally, no, but if they were really that high on him, it's worth a flyer. But I think tackle's fine. He's going to be a developmental guy, of course. We're talking 2-3 years from now. Similar to the Steelers kind of know it a little bit with a guy like Alejandro Villanueva, who obviously wasn't a rugby guy, but was a defensive end, converted to tackle, missed time with his military service, but he was able to develop in time and become a really good left tackle. Last thing on the Eagles, though, I mentioned it earlier. I don't have the whole list of the undrafted guys you guys brought in, but I love the class. The Eagles always seem to get really good undrafted players. They got Greg Clement last year.
Right, of course.
I see Josh Adams potentially. I was really surprised Adams did not get drafted. This is a guy that averaged close to 7 yards per carry last year. Explosive, power. I think better hands. Was a dominant high school player. Had some injuries he was able to overcome. A really good story and a heck of a career at Notre Dame. Whenever he got to be the guy, it wasn't always the case. But when he was in that role, I mean, he excelled there. So I like that. I like Jeremy Reeves as well from South Alabama, who is a versatile guy. Some as a corner, some as a safety. Maybe not the fastest, but just had a really solid career and then carve out a niche on special teams. Yeah,
if we're going to go to the undrafted rookie class, Alex, I definitely agree. That's the number one thing that stood out to me was Josh Adams. I was surprised he didn't get drafted either. I know we had some of the injury concerns with ND, but you look at a guy that I think has good size, can run in between the tackles. He's really versatile, too, in the pass game. So I think he's going to be able to jump in and compete for a roster spot. I really do. And I think he has some special teams value, too, for the Eagles. So I really liked that pickup there. And, yeah, I was surprised he didn't get signed. So, yeah, I'm really excited about the draft, the free agency draft class, too, for the Eagles because, as you mentioned, they got Corey Clement last year, and they've hit home runs on some of these guys in the past. So you can always count on that for sure. So let's look at the Eagles draft.
Jordan Thomas, the corner from Oklahoma, is the name to watch, man. I don't want to get too caught up in just, measurables, but he ran, I believe, the quickest three-cone time in combine history. I think it was a 6.28, which is just,
wow.
Absurd.
That is absurd.
And so I don't know much about his game, and it's another guy that's probably going to be more of a nickel type. It's going to be a backup, but just someone with the athletic profile of some rare traits. I think it's an interesting flyer to take on. Then you got like Briscoe, the quarterback from Sam Houston State, I believe, who had a tremendous career at the FCS level or the D2 level, and just put up some big numbers. It doesn't obviously mean that you're going to have NFL success, but when you go with the small school guys, you look for guys that had some big time college production, because that generally gives you the best shot. If they dominated the lower level, they gives you a chance to compete at the higher level, which is of course the NFL.
And so we're going to go to the Steelers picks now, Alex, and I want to start with quarterback. I know it was the third-round pick, but there were a lot of reports around it that the Steelers liked him in the first and then thought about picking him in the second and just went on, in the third and on and on. And they finally do pick him in the third round. And you already have a third-round pick last year in Josh Dobbs. I get he probably wasn't going to be the future anyway, but now you bring in two back-to-back third-round picks. Landry Jones is in there. So as you mentioned on Twitter, he's probably going to be the odd man out here. And to me, the Steelers were not as aggressive as I thought and I think they should have been, considering where Bell's contract stands, where Big Ben is in his career, or maybe he could be more years coming up here. We'll talk about that too briefly if we have time. But I just didn't get the approach overall because, again, you look at the time window for them to win a Super Bowl and contend, and then they take a third-round pick on a quarterback who they already kind of have, so to speak. I didn't quite get the insight there. And if they liked him in the first round, I saw a lot of contradictory in their ways here in the pick of Mason Rudolph. What were your overall thoughts on that?
No, I didn't see much in the way of contradiction. I was just always opposed to a quarterback. Not even anything against Rudolph. I'm not saying he's going to be a bad player. I just don't know, when you're going to get to play him. What's the path for him to be evaluated? Because they view him as someone that can be Ben's successor. And, if Ben plays the way he's talking, 3 to 4 to 5 years, you're not going to really get that opportunity with a guy like Mason Rudolph. So, I would have rather had a guy that can make an impact now today. I thought overall they did things that can help you win today. By drafting Terrell Edmonds in the first, by drafting James Washington in the second. Those are guys that are, Washington's going to obviously start after the Martavis Bryant trade, and Edmonds is going to be a sub-package dime defender. So you're going to get impact from them on day one. For who the odd man out is going to be, we'll see. I'm not going to guarantee it. They're going to bring off quarterbacks. Camp Dobbs is on the back burner. He was a fifth-round pick last year, not a third, so he was never viewed as the year. The investment wasn't as heavy. But they're high on Rudolph, and we'll see how he does in training camp.
One thing I guess that will help Rudolph is they pick his teammate in the second round, James Washington. And what were your thoughts there on that pick? Maybe try to add in for what they traded away with Martavis Bryant as he head to the Raiders.
Yeah, it's going to be about as seamless of a transition as possible. At least that's the hope. He's a classic Z-type receiver, a guy that can win vertically. He's not blessed with Martavis Bryant's physical skill set in terms of the height, weight, speed. This is a guy that's a little bit shorter, ran in mid-4.5s. Bryant was a low 4.4s guy. But I think Bryant and Washington played to a similar size. Bryant played smaller than what he was listed. Washington plays to his size, plays a little bit bigger. He's more of a nuanced route runner, a tougher guy that wins with his technique and his routes, being able to stack cornerbacks and track the football, make contested combative catches downfield. So I thought it was a really good pick. A guy that's going to be the Z receiver is going to start almost essentially from day one when they go 11 personnel. At the very least, Juju will kick inside. Washington will play the Z, AB's at the X. But a tough guy they liked a lot, guy they learned a lot about. Obviously looking at Rudolph, and they took a hard look at Washington as well. That was probably the pick I liked the most out of the entire draft, to be honest.
Real quick before we move on here, I actually want to get your thoughts too on Marcus Allen at Penn State, because I did like that pick. Surprised of getting a third-round pick in return for Martavis Bryant?
That was probably the biggest surprise of the entire draft. I don't know what Oakland's doing trying to give up a third, but I wasn't too keen on drafting Bryant, but I said it back in February, the minimum I would take for him is a third, and I didn't think we were going to get a third for a guy with his issues, but the Raiders did, so I'm happy with that.
I think you have to be if you're a Steeler fan for that one. And the other pick I like, as I mentioned quickly, Alex, was Marcus Allen from Penn State. Get some safety help for the Steelers there in the fifth round. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I feel better about the Allen pick after taking Terrell Edmonds. Had it just been Marcus Allen as the only safety they took, because I think he's kind of a limited upside guy, not going to be a splash player, not going to be an impact, playmaker. I would have felt worse. But he's going to, his upside's limited, but he's got a high floor. He's a striker. He's a hard hitter. He's going to be an excellent special teamer, I think. He's going to provide you good safety depth and has potential to be more of a dime linebacker and sub package. Not this year, I don't anticipate, but potentially 2-3 years from now. So a guy that well. Tom Bradley didn't coach him, but he was at Penn State for 35, 40 years, and he knows the guys there well. I think they knew his coach in Penn State. He was from the Pittsburgh area, so a lot of local ties there to kind of have a good evaluation of him. It just goes back to the Steelers' overall themes. There were a couple themes this year. There was the hard to smarts mantra, which, guys that are high IQ, high character guys, they don't really take a lot of risks the last several drafts. They wanted, guys that were relatively young but with good starting experience. Terrell Edmonds, the first-round pick. He's a junior but had 31 starts. Like Jalen Samuels, who's still relatively young, to play 50 games. Okorafor, the third-round pick, the tackle from Western Michigan, isn't even 21, but he's a 3-year starter. Marcus Allen, I think, is 21 or 20. I think about to turn 22, and he started 45, 46 games. So there was that, the youth plus experience, the harshness, smarts, and the versatility. Allen can do a lot. James Washington can do different things. Okorafor can play both tackle spots. Terrell Edmonds is going to be a versatile player. Jalen Samuels, who I talked about, might be one of the most versatile players in the entire draft. So the list goes on and on. So I think there was a very clear couple of themes in the Steelers draft, and the Steelers stuck to it pretty well.
And it also did not have plans for a linebacker that was not drafted in this class, which was very, very surprising, I thought, considering that it's been a norm for the Steelers in the past, but it's also a need this time around.
Okay, Sherlock, can you hear me?
Yep, I got you.
All right, I think we just lost the connection for a second, Bergen. No, yeah, it definitely was a surprise they didn't take a linebacker. The Steelers tried, though. The reports are they wanted to trade up to get Rashaan Evans, the linebacker from Alabama, and had he followed 28, he would have been the guy. They just
Definitely
jumped Tennessee, and now he's a Titan. I think it just came down to, and Colbert kind of confirmed this, the Steelers wanted that MAC linebacker who's not a specialized position. He's a 100% snap guy. All situations, you have to be able to do everything as the MAC linebacker. And after those top 4 backers came off, everyone else was kind of a specialized player who wasn't going to really fit the role. So it was surprising. Depth is thin, but I understand the idea. And so instead of taking the linebacker, it kind of went heavy on safeties. And now you look at a guy like Edmonds and Allen with short and long-term potential to play that dime linebacker role. And that maybe kind of makes up for the inside linebacker not being addressed.
We'll definitely keep an eye on that as the preseason goes on. So, Alex, let's branch out to the rest of the NFL, what we saw across the draft. And, of course, we got to start with the number 1 pick. Literally, the day after we recorded our draft show, we had Josh Allen possibly going to the Browns. I still had Sam Darnold and believe in that. But then all of a sudden, the reports come out of nowhere. The Browns want to take Baker Mayfield, and lo and behold, they take him number 1 overall. And once again, I'm just shaking my head.
See, I'm not shaking my head. I mean, I think it sounds like most evaluators had Baker Mayfield as the number 1 guy, or at least number 1 or number 2. I mean, I would have taken, Josh Rosen was my top quarterback. I mean, you could argue Darnold was but Mayfield was my number 2 quarterback. So, we'll see. Obviously, we're not going to know. But I think Scott McLaughlin, the former Redskins GM or whatever his title was, had a big hand in making Baker Mayfield the guy. Hugh Jackson was totally removed from the situation, which I think was a good thing. And, I thought the Browns top to bottom had an excellent draft to get, Baker at 1. I mean, that's, of course, going to be how this draft class is evaluated. But you have him with, I like him a lot. Denzel Ward, was a little surprised they won't Ward over Chubb. A really good player in his own right. I'm trying to remember some of the other guys. Austin Corbett was one of my favorite picks from Nevada. Now the question is, where do you play Corbett? I see him more as an interior guy, maybe a center to replace J.C. Treader. That left tackle spot could still be an issue, but I love Corbett. He had a great Senior Bowl week. I think that's kind of what put him on the map. I thought overall the Browns had an excellent draft, maybe the best of the AFC North.
See, this is where you and I disagree a little bit, because now we know we've talked about Baker Mayfield. I don't want to necessarily go over that again, what I don't like about him on tape and why I don't think he's worthy of a number 1 pick, let alone a top 5 or top 10 pick. But just the way the board, it sounded like was going to dictate it first. If they, let's say, if they were that interested in Baker Mayfield, I think is and maybe correct me if I'm wrong, Alex, is that if they were the team with the highest interest in Baker Mayfield, the Giants and/or the Jets were probably only going to take Baker Mayfield because the Browns had shown interest in Sam Darnold and/or Josh Allen at 1. So if they were using that as a smokescreen and really had interest in Baker Mayfield, you could have taken a guy in Saquon Barkley at 1, who to me again is the best player of this draft, and then taking a guy like taking your quarterback in Baker Mayfield at 4, because the Jets would have had interest. It would have definitely taken Sam Darnold at 3, in my opinion. There, so I think the Browns missed out. But even you throw that aside, okay, take Baker Mayfield at 1 because he's your guy, but then you leave a guy in Bradley Chubb off the board. I mean, he was the second best player. Arguably, was giving Barkley a run for his money as the best player in this draft. Now, Denzel Ward's a pretty good player, and I think it sounds like he would be a good top 5, top 10 pick. But to me, just I think Bradley Chubb was the better pick to make at that point. So I just didn't get how the Browns handled those two top 5 picks that they had.
Well, no, I totally reject the idea that they should have taken Barkley or one. I mean, it had to be a quarterback. You take your quarterback. You don't let the board dictate, who your quarterback is going to be, because there's no guarantee Mayfield gets there. The Jets had a lot of interest in Mayfield. That was if I felt like the Mayfield wasn't going to go to the Browns, he would have gone to the Jets. And even if it wasn't going to be the Giants or the Jets, you worry about a trade-up. What if someone moves up and they like Mayfield? The Patriots apparently got a ton of interest in actually trying to make a push for Baker Mayfield. So if Mayfield's your guy, you have the number 1 pick for a reason. So you can take your guy without worrying about whoever else is going to be there. Now, whether they're right or wrong on the Mayfield evaluation, again, we'll see. I mean, nobody knows that. But if that's your guy, that's your guy. Now, to the Chubb thing, I mean, yeah, you can make a really good argument that Chubb should have been the player. I think they were saying that the Browns had a good pass rush last year, but there were so many instances where they were just a step shy of getting to the quarterback, and they blamed a lot of it on coverage. Instead of our coverage can hold just that much longer, our pass rush will be vastly improved because of it. But there's all philosophical debates you can go down. So I mean, you can, I would have taken Chubb, but I don't hold much of a grudge. I mean, there's no grudge, but I don't offer much criticism for them taking Denzel Ward.
All right, so now we go to Josh Allen, who again had the day after we do our podcast leading into the draft. The reports come out about the tweets that he had, like he was like 12 or 13 years old with the racial tweets. And so there's the fear that he might drop, kind of almost like how Laramie Tunsil did, considering the timing of both those instances that happened with Laramie Tunsil a few years ago. He dropped to 13 where he could have been perhaps a top 5 pick. But doesn't happen to Josh Allen. The Bills, in fact, trade up to number 7, which that one I don't understand either.
What don't you understand about it? Just
well, yeah, the tweets aside, I mean, I think that was somebody who had a grudge against him, trying to attack him, and he was 12, 13 years old. To me, that's not really a big deal as far as his character goes. I'm more concerned about on the field, as we talked about last week. We talked about the accuracy issues, the footwork. The only thing to me that's intriguing about him is his arm, and that's about it. So I let alone would I not picked him in the first round, but I wouldn't have traded up for him and given up 2 second-round picks, I think, that the Bills gave up.
Yeah, I mean, Allen definitely wasn't really my guy either. I'm with you. I don't really care about the tweets at all, and I don't even really see it as a Tunsil situation because there was enough time for Allen to talk to evaluators and explain themselves. And the Tunsil thing, you didn't know when the gas mask, him smoking weed happened. Was this a recent thing that's going to put him in jeopardy? It was suspension. I mean, it was because it happened like a half hour before the draft started. There was
right, that's true. This was
the damage control, right. No time for teams and evaluators to figure out when did this happen. Because it's a video too, it's hard to tell. The Allen things are obviously dated, so you understand when they happen, and there's not going to be any sort of punishment from the league upcoming. Now with are those concerns there? Maybe. I mean, hopefully you learned enough about Josh Allen in the process that you learned his character, and if you had those concerns at all, they would have come up in your kind of your character evaluation. So I think bottom line is, I think it's going to be forgotten about pretty quickly. But yeah, I mean, Allen wasn't going to be my pick, and Buffalo, see what they get with him.
Now, the only team I'll say that did a nice job with these quarterbacks was Arizona. I didn't think they reached it all. I thought Josh Allen was a borderline top 10 pick. It was more of a mid-round pick for me, but the fact that they traded up for him, didn't give up a whole lot for him in the process, and you bring in a guy, I think that's the best quarterback of this draft, I thought Arizona handled that perfectly.
Yeah, I thought they did a nice job, and they'll maybe play him sooner than they think with Sam Bradford's injury.
Oh, yeah, I think regardless, I think Rosen's going to be in sometime this year because I think he's going to be the most ready out of all these quarterbacks. And to me, I don't think Arizona's going to be that great a team this year. They'll be a 500 team at best. So I could see 6, 7, 8 games in where you're going to see Rosen under center, regardless of Sam Bradford's health.
Yeah, that's definitely possible.
So we're going to go to the Ravens. I mentioned before, they traded back into the draft into number 32, where the Eagles were, to get Lamar Jackson. Now, I haven't seen a whole lot on him there, but I don't know if I would have taken a chance on him like that. What were your thoughts there, Alex?
I think it's a great pick. Now, I was a little worried about the Ravens class initially because they take Hayden Hurst. They trade back several times, I think twice, and then they go. They take Hayden Hurst, and I did not have Hayden Hurst as a first-round pick. I think a 25-year-old tight end without any dominant trait, with how long it takes tight ends to develop, is just kind of a bad idea. But I thought they kind of saved themselves by trading back into the first. With the Eagles, right, and to get Lamar Jackson,
right.
And I think Jackson's going to be a great player, and obviously, Flacco's future is limited both in his play and his contract. So I thought that was one of the better picks of the first round.
What else stood to you from the first round?
I'd have to go back through the whole list. I think one of the most common criticisms is the Saints trading up for Marcus Davenport, and not only trading up but giving up a first round pick. When we saw the trade happen, we all kind of thought, okay, this is the Lamar Jackson pick if you're giving up a first. And generally, if you're going to give up that much, you're going to do it for a guy you view as a franchise quarterback. Now, the lack of pass rushers in this class had something to do with it. That's totally possible. And Davenport has high upside, but it's also high upside that usually comes high downside. And I thought he was inconsistent in the Senior Bowl, doesn't always play to his size and his power, and isn't always the most effective pass rusher. I think you just have to get more consistency out of his game. He didn't dominate the Senior Bowl the way that he was hyped to be, and the way that you would expect, a mid to first round pick would do. So that was probably one of the bigger misses of the first round.
Yeah, I agree. I was completely flabbergasted and dumbfounded when the Saints made that move because I thought it was Lamar Jackson too, which again I probably would have ripped regardless because I didn't think Lamar Jackson would be worth that big of a move up, but it's somebody different as Marcus Davenport, and I just couldn't believe it. I think that was probably worse than what the Browns did in handling their first two picks. But I like what the Colts did. I think they really addressed their offensive line well, starting with Quentin Nelson at number 6. I thought that was a really smart pick. I think the Bears had a pretty nice draft as well. They start with Roquan Smith at number 8. They continue to add to that defense. Let's see what I think I was going to say. I think the Cowboys getting later Van Der Esch was a good pick too. You never know with Sean Lee's health. You want to keep adding some depth. They've lost a lot of guys defensively again this year, so I thought that was a pretty good pick. I was okay with that. A lot of Cowboy fans thought they maybe should have gone either tight end or receiver there. I was fine with them going at linebacker. And Sony Michel to New England I really like too. New England had a very interesting draft where they basically kept trading back every time they had the opportunity to, but I thought they got a couple of nice players too. Any thoughts there on those couple picks?
Where do I want to start with this one? I'm in pretty much agreement. I think Van Der Esch is going to be a really good player, and the Cowboys are comfortable with him medically, so I'm not. Some of the other ones that stuck out to me in the first round, Derwin James dropping all the way to 17 in the Chargers. That's excellent value there for a guy that was viewed as potential top 10 pick. Thought the Packers had a solid draft overall to get Jair Alexander in the first, the long corner from Louisville, and then get Josh Jackson in the second round, who was best in the zone scheme, but had 8 interceptions I think 2 years ago, and the Packers have kind of transformed that secondary. So you have Josh Jackson, you have Jair Alexander, you have Josh Jones, you have all the Jays in that Packers secondary, and I think that's a group that's going to be on the rise.
Definitely. Any small school guys that you saw, Alex, pop in? One for me, I said that was Amir Abdullah from Bucknell. I thought it was a guy that we talked about before. Guy that's fast with the ball, quick first step. He got signed by the Bears a couple hours after the draft. I don't know if you had a couple other people.
P.J. Hall went a little. Let me see, where did he go? Where did P.J. Hall go? He went 57 for the Raiders. That was one of the first small school guys off the board right after Goddard. That surprised me that he went that high. But it's a nose tackle that kind of moves like a 3 tech. So there's potential maybe a Geno Atkins kind of comparison to be made there, and a guy that dominated the small school level like you guys ever have. The Jets get Nathan Shepard. Excellent value for Fort Hays State. This is a guy that balled out at the Senior Bowl. Had to leave early. I think he broke his hand, and that kind of limited him through some of the pre-draft process. But I thought the Jets, to help that run defense at 72, was an excellent pick, and that's a guy that I didn't know much about. That had a great Senior Bowl week. And then Alex Kappa from Tampa, they're drafted by the Bucs in the 3rd round. I think he's going to kick inside the guard. He's played tackle at Humboldt State. Senior Bowl had him playing tackle and guard. But just an old school and nasty player that's going to bring some physicality and an attitude to that offensive line. I thought that was a pretty good selection by the Buccaneers.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how well he develops, especially at guard too. I thought he performed pretty well at the Pro Bowl and trying to show that versatility. So that's gonna be fun to watch too. I'll throw one more in. Chase Edmonds, running back from Fordham, goes in the 4th round surprisingly to Arizona. I thought he would be a late day 3 pick at best, just because of the injury history that he's had. He had an ankle injury that kind of sent him back in his senior year. I saw him when Fordham played Bucknell. I had a chance to call Bucknell's game at Fordham towards the end of the final game of the regular season in November, and that was his first game back from the injury. Came back, looked like he was never hurt. I think what stands out to me about him, just from watching him live in that game, was his cutback ability. He's got great vision, and the minute he steps back, he's gone. This guy can shake off defenders. He's got tremendous acceleration. I think he's a little bit small, but I think he's a guy with those couple of traits, and I think he might have a chance here to make some noise as long as he stays healthy. But I thought that was really surprising by Arizona to get him in the 4th round there.
Yeah, I thought 4th was maybe a round or two higher than I expected him to. I thought the injuries was just going to be kind of a concern there. But like you said, Matt, I'm with you. If he stays healthy, this has got to be a solid backup for David Johnson.
All right, so that's our quick look at the NFL draft for 2018. Next, we get into rookie minicamp, and then we got OTAs, and then other mandatory minicamp, and then we get into training camp finally, and it all starts off once again. So hopefully within next couple months or so, we'll try to get in maybe another one just to kind of another look at the off season, and maybe we'll go through the schedules that just came out as well. Any quick thoughts, Alex, before we wrap up on the Steelers schedule? I know you hate this. We're not going to do wins and losses. I'm not going to make you do that right now, but
yeah, not going to do that. No, not really. I know that people say the first half is easier than the second half, and on paper it looks like that. But who knows how this stuff goes? I'm trying to think. There's a couple short weeks where I think they're playing like 3 games in. I forget what it is. I think it's like 12 or 13 days. It's a really tight turnaround with some of the I think Monday, Thursday, something. I mean, it's something crazy like that. But the only big takeaway I think I really had was that I think they play 5 of their 6 AFC North games within like the first 7 or 8 weeks. I mean, they get those games out of the schedule, and then they finish up in Week 17 against the Bengals. So they play it's AFC North heavy early. So they get out of the gate early, and this one the Steelers do. I mean, they could really seize control of the AFC North by mid-season.
When you look at the Eagles' schedule, I think they can start 4-0, but then after that, it's going to be pretty tough. You got Minnesota at the Giants on a Thursday night off in back-to-back situations, and you're home against Carolina. Then you got the London game in Jacksonville. Then the bye week comes, and after that, it's pretty tough, too. You got Dallas and the Saints and the Giants back-to-back, and the Redskins. You actually have 4 out of 5 NFC East games with the trip to New Orleans all thrown in there, and then a trip to L.A. after that. So before you wrap up against Houston and a road game at the Redskins. So basically, it gets really tough for the Eagles after, I think, the first 4 games. I can see a 4-0 start at worst, 3-1. But obviously, we got a long way to go before then. Depends on Carson Wentz's health, too. The Eagles made a couple moves, bringing Joe Callahan in as a camp body, basically. So we'll see where things go there. Marcus Whedon, too, the former Steeler, now signed with the Eagles, too. Darren Sproles is back. So a couple additions for the Eagles, too, right after the draft as well. So we'll see how things go as we head into the minicamp OTA portion of the offseason. And hopefully we'll be back to break it down a little bit here on the show. So hopefully we'll talk sometime before then. But if not, we'll definitely talk as we get closer to training camp. Alex, always a pleasure. Another draft in the books.
Yeah, it was a great one. Good talking to you, man.
And make sure to follow the podcast on Twitter at NGNG_NFL. You can follow Alex on Twitter at Alex_Kozora. I'm on Twitter at MCatrillo. That's going to do it for this edition of the Next Game, New Game podcast. For Alex Kozora, I'm Matt Catrillo. We'll talk to you soon here on the Next Game, New Game podcast.